I live in Lynn, Massachusetts, and serve a congregation in Swampscott, Massachusetts. I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister with privilege of call in the United Church of Christ. So let's get started. How many of you have a considerable endowment? Okay, well, if you don't, I hope you get some good takeaways from this talk anyway, or you can just relax and have that post-lunch nap. So you have a large endowment. Here, let's go to the first slide, Jim. And here's some of the things that you'll hear from people who don't, who are scrambling for that stewardship campaign. Oh, that's a problem. We should have such problems. It must be nice not to worry when the furnace breaks and you get those ice dams in the storms, yeah. And I'm sure your congregation will want to support this worthy cause. You get that everywhere you go, especially if you're the minister. You'll have people slipping you brochures and business cards and all kinds of greetings when you go to any kind of community event, and you feel kind of guilty and ashamed because you know that part of why they're giving you the warm hug is that your congregation supported them in some way, but you don't know why or how, or so you can actually lose track of all of the generosity. It's again not a bad thing, but it's something that can happen. And how wonderful that you can afford a full-time minister and staff. Boy, we'd really like to have that. In the next slide, too. But it is a problem. It is a problem because security, financial security, can create inertia, and it actually can lead to something I call churchitarianism, where we have the funds to preserve our beautiful building and to replace the steeple and to do a $500,000 organ revamping program, which is,
what?
I know, right? I served a congregation that raised $250,000, $250,000, so quickly to do an organ refurbishment. So is that where your values really are? You constantly have to guard against this in faithful ways and question, where are we spending all this money? Do we worship our building or do we worship God? It takes actually a tremendous amount of time, administrative effort, and discernment to decide what do we want to support with our largesse. And that can actually lead to a lot of conflict. It can lead to a lot of power struggles and people going for long periods of time with rancor against one another because someone fought for this big project and someone else had another vision. And we can afford a full-time minister and staff, but do we need that? Maybe that staff is over-serving a small group of laity that really are being, in some ways, uninvolved and being denied the passion and the ownership of being God's church together, being the people of God, because there's so much staff. Next one. So I always think about Jesus and let the dead bury the dead when I think about endowments. And it's kind of a joke that I would have put that up there. But really, first of all, Jesus, of course, gives us the inheritance of conflict about money in general, right? Of course, we know that. Give everything away. If someone needs your coat, give them your shirt. So we have a lot of conflicted emotions about money as churches in the first place. But when we are living off an endowment, what we are actually doing spiritually is our life force is being funded in many ways by the church triumphant, those gone to their reward. And the church militant, that wonderful old phrase, is not as engaged as they need to be. And I think that because money represents our life force, there is a spiritual sort of psychic reality about having all of your programming funded by the dead that is really of concern, or should be, to Christians who believe that we live communally as Christians. We share what we have. If we're not living communally because of the largesse of those gone before, there is a problem at the heart of our congregational life. So legacy funds, that word legacy is not really a living, exciting word. It ties us to the past. So the future church needs to move forward. And endowment money keeps us perpetually in a kind of developmental stage of childhood, doesn't it? Because we're always going, what would mommy and daddy wanted us to have done to do with this money? You know, and you will hear people say that. You know, they're constantly referring back to the benefactor or benefactress, the old patriarchs and matriarchs, and saying, well, they would have wanted it. They're dead. You know, we are the grown-ups now. We have to have the prayerful vision moving forward. So let's go on. Endowments, so just to review, that endowments do create a spiritual reality in our congregations. And they can train newcomers very quickly to patterns of non-giving. And what you'll hear people say is, oh, well, I'm giving my time and my talent. And that's wonderful. And that's really important. But we also give treasure because, again, we are Christians. We live communally. We don't just bring a meal to the potluck. We bring the money that represents the toil of our days, and we share it to be the church together. We are not a public utility. And if you're serving I heard an amen, I love hearing that. If you are serving an historic New England church on the green, and some of you might be, people have been driving by that church and riding by it and walking by it all their lives, or ever since they moved to town, and they just think it's always been there and it's going to always be there. And it's not. So that's something we have to really work on with our new folks. Moving on. So endowments can perpetuate an endless argument about what givers would have wanted. They can enable a culture of avoidance and silence and awkwardness around money. They can foster a sense of privilege and noblesse oblige that infects congregations that aren't necessarily made up of economically privileged folks. But it's like, we have all this money, and so the others over there might need some of our money, and it creates this really terrible division of we have, and then we have the needy. We are all needy. We all stand in need of faith community and God's love and the works of the church and in the world. And so that kind of, separation that having a big endowment can set up is also something that takes effort to overcome. And it can attract power brokers to leadership that creates fiefdoms and governance logjams. So, how do we overcome this? Getting to a living budget. Talk about it all the time. Money is not something we should talk about once a year when it's all of a sudden like plopped into the church life, like it's canvas time or it's stewardship season. We should always be talking about money. We think about it all the time. We have to deal with it all the time. It's energy. It's your life force. Do not speak of money, please, in euphemistic, flowery, pietistic terms that make everybody go, money, oh, it's time for our stewardship campaign. And the newcomers are like, what are they talking about? If you are talking about fundraising and dollars, please talk about it in those terms. I believe that guilt and shame are not productive techniques for communicating expectations around giving and spending. So we need to set expectations before we enter into those conversations as to what tone we are going to take. Good, I'm going to be good in 2 minutes. So that it's discerning and prayerful and compassionate, respectful. We're going to use Robert's rules, or we're going to pass a talking stick. We have to be willing to discuss class issues, ethnic and cultural differences around money, and general trends of giving as a congregation. So there's not all this like, well, you young people aren't giving enough. Well, that's very divisive. Get help with this. One sermon a year is not enough. One more. Talk about finances all year. Please try, if you can make one commitment, try to get term limits for all your finance and stewardship related committees and leadership teams. I bet I'm hearing some amens on that. Please free up those people for other ministry experiences. You might consider voting to restrict a portion of your endowment for outreach ministries and mission ministries. Then it takes the question off the table. You've made the decision, you've made the commitment, it's in the bylaws or whatever. Bring financial assessment, faithful financial assessment to all your ministry teams. Are we doing things that are sustainable and faithful and successful? Or are we overspending and not talking about it? And one more, make it easy to give, please. My own congregation, and I know I'm wrapping up, my own congregation, we have a fiscal year that begins July 1, a stewardship campaign that happens in March, and of course the calendar year, January 1. And people are like, I pledged, but I don't know if I fulfilled my pledge because I made my pledge in March, but I'm still fulfilling my pledge that I made last March for July. Hello, help me, Lord. Make it easy, teach people how it works. Please get online and let them give electronically. Don't take any excuses for not doing that. That's how everybody gives now. Nobody writes checks. I was going to be so like gentle about saying that, but I'm in a rush. So you're going to get on everything, and cast a specific vision that people can give to. We intend, this is an example, we intend to raise 100% of our operating budget from congregational pledges by this certain time, so that we can commit % rather of our yearly endowment disbursement to 3 partner organizations with which we have a really good and faithful relationship in the community. Set a goal, be specific, and I think I'm asking you to make these commitments. If nothing else, make giving easy. Talk about money in a non-anxious way all year. Break the silence and dispel the mystery around money. Break leadership monopolies through bylaws if necessary. This is not personal, it's institutional. Okay? And you can always say that. It's not personal,